The clinking of glasses and the chatter of people chorused throughout the large function hall, a cacophony of familiar yet unfamiliar voices mingling together into such a mess of a symphony that your head almost started to pound. You weren't drunk. Far from it. You've hardly gone through a glass of the champagne that you still swiveled in your fingers. If anything, the boredom started to sink in. It was compulsory for the pro-hero community to attend many a gala and event. But this particular one you've always dreaded for years and had second-guessed yourself the entire journey to the function, hoping that your feet would have a mind of their own and turn you around without having to make that conscious decision. But instead, here you were, sitting at a table with half-drunk champagne amongst your former fellows. At your school reunion. UA was a prestigious academy, but their management skills were left to be desired in the more recent years and turn of events. They had to postpone your reunion every year after 10 years due to unforeseeable events, but somehow they managed to organize one, thanks to the growing community and most likely the free hands they had from all the young students currently attending. Every year you had felt a wave of relief whenever you received that serendipitous email that postponement occurred. But even now, with the growing threat of the city under villainy, the UA Council was able to arrange this event for their alumni. You found it surprising that they pulled it off during these trying times. Still bored out of your mind, you eyed the other alumni around the function room, recognizing a few familiar faces, and was mildly surprised on a handful who have changed over the years. Being a manager of an agency had its perks when it came to social decorum and deciphering human behavior, but you were only hoping to avoid as much contact as possible. The occasional hello and how are yous were a given, but other than that you weren't in the mood to converse. Your attention turned back onto your glass, uninterested in its contents before you decided to stretch your limbs high above you and take your leave from the empty table you occupied. The formalities had already been done and dusted, and there was no need for you to sit and wait for anything to happen, until you felt a tap on your shoulder.
"Traveler, hey!"
greeted a loud croon from behind.
"Long time no see! I've heard a lot of good things about you!"
That voice was unmistakable. "Oh, thanks, Yamada," you sighed, turning to find the loud blonde with his signature grin. "I could say the same thing. It's not hard to hear about you, too." Yamada chuckled under his breath, making you wonder whether he took your comment in stride, or if the sarcasm didn't click.
"You're still as funny as ever,"
he complimented.
"Say, how does it feel working for one of the most popular agencies in Musatafu?"
"What is this, an interview?" you asked before a small mic appeared before your face.
"In a way,"
answered Yamada.
"I've been asked to grab some bites, and I thought you'd make a great candidate."
"No thanks," you flatly replied, turning your back on Yamada as you continued your walk out of the function.
"What? Why?"
he questioned, walking up to you.
"You're working for Endeavor, so you must have some good anecdotes from there. How about my favorite managerial student buddy let me in on some of that, huh?"
"You're a pro hero, you should know this already," you reasoned.
"I'm also a teacher as well. I'm not on the field like most people,"
he retaliated with an optimistic chirp.
"And besides, I thought you'd stick around to, have a chat."
You eyed the blonde, seeing him pull his blonde locks behind his ear. It was strange to see him without the massive amount of hair product and gel that could miraculously hold all of that hair on end. In fact, he looked proper for once, looking rather smart and chic in his button-up vest and tux and a proper set of glasses, not those tacky things you thought were visors. You sighed as he grinned and waggled his brows, keen on your response, and still with the tiny mic in his fingers. I'm more afraid of your enthusiasm to hear what I have to say, you commented, crossing your arms and hunching yourself inwards. If this was a press release, I'd have to shut you down for improper etiquette and unwarranted journalism.
Ah, come on. Traveler, you know how much I'm not a fan of the press.
And yet, you're a radio host.
For my own enjoyment!
Your shoulders drooped while you groaned. High school life back in the day felt like a dream, and yet you still recall those days when you would just mind your own business until certain hero students would interrupt your solitude. I am not sharing any stories with you, at least about my professional life, you reiterated as you turned away from the blonde.
So, would you like to share stories about our happy days?
He followed up, hopping up to your pace and walking alongside you towards the exit.
At least for some material. I have to put something together for UA's marketing.
Sorry, Yamada. You're not getting anything from me. Your head began to pound, and you furrowed your brows. But to Yamada, it would have looked like a sign of annoyance from your end. You heard a long sigh escape from him beside you, causing you to peek through one of your eyes from the strain.
Alright.
He deflated.
I promised I wouldn't push you too much tonight.
You watched him immediately flash his grin and wave his fingers at you, his body smoothly walking in the opposite direction as he did.
But if you're looking for Shouta, he's around here somewhere. At least say hi before you leave.
And with that, Yamada left you to your devices, walking back into the fray and approaching another poor soul with a barrage of questions. Despite the dull throb in your temples, you quirked a smirk at the man. You couldn't fathom the amount of energy he had in him, and the optimism was almost sickeningly sweet. However, the throb continued to persist. You needed to find someplace quiet, at least to dull the amount of processing power your brain was producing. It didn't help in a social setting where you had to account for every personality, every quirk, every reaction, and every time someone decided to clink their glasses against their fingers, or tug at their shirt, or hitch their breath. Your quirk was a nuisance sometimes. Why did you have to bring your working brain to a social function? In fact, why couldn't your quirk just settle like an on and off switch? It was a reason why you excelled in what you did, but it became a hindrance on a day-to-day basis. Making your way out of the function room, you eventually found a quiet spot not too far from the kitchen staff. The sound of food being prepared and the cries of the staff members didn't affect your state of mind, but everything else did. As if shattering your thought processes for a moment of relief, you heard heavy footfalls turn the corner, spotting a blur of red in your peripherals that soon leaned against the same wall you had situated yourself on. Shouta Aizawa, panting and catching his breath, tugged at his tie to relieve himself from the flush crawling up his neck. You stared at him, curious and confused for his flustered state until...
Aizawa! Come on! I was joking! Get it?
What was a Ketsubutsu alumni doing at this reunion? Was she on a date with a fellow? You shook your head, feeling all of the pressure return. The number of countless quandaries, probabilities, and circumstances flooding right back in. As in by instinct, you rushed towards Aizawa and grabbed his wrist, shocking him of your presence as you did so. Without a word, you pulled him along, quickly analyzing the hallway until you spotted a door not too far away. The number of possibilities one door could be swarmed in your mind, but ignoring all of that, you quickly opened it, shoved Aizawa inside, and shut the door behind you. Just what were you thinking? The light footfalls of what you assumed was Ms. Joke walked past the door until they faded away into the distance. You let out a sigh of relief, along with Aizawa, who also had been holding his breath. Having been engulfed in the sudden decision-making you had gone through, you found yourself not in a room, but a broom closet. Dark with very little light except for the bright fluorescence that shone through the door's cracks.
Sorry,
you murmured.
I just acted on instinct.
You looked up to Aizawa, finding it difficult to see the outline of his face in the dark. However, whenever he shifted, it made it easier to guess where to look.
Better than out there,
he replied, loosening his tie further to relieve himself.
Tonight's just not the night to deal with her antics at the moment.
You hummed in reply. Out of most people you were acquainted with, Miss Joke was, by all accounts, unpredictable, at least for your mind to comprehend the possibilities of what her next move would be. Just thinking about it hurt. The rattle of the doorknob pulled you out of your thoughts, watching as Aizawa attempted to open the door and finding it locked. Not only that, there was no keyhole from inside the closet. Fantastic.
We're locked in, aren't we?
You asked dejectedly.
I'm afraid so,
responded Aizawa after a slight groan escaped his lips.
But while Fukakado is still out there, I'm refraining from yelling for help.
Aizawa did prove a point. The both of you were close enough to kitchen staff who would most likely have a key for this closet, but it would only catch the attentions of the outburst hero, and the last thing you wanted was that much energy to contend with.
How long do you reckon she'll give up on the search?
You grumbled before leaning against the wall of the closet.
She's tenacious, and by all accounts even I can't see any way out without her being involved.
You heard Aizawa shuffle in the dark, most likely also making himself as comfortable as possible. His long legs outstretched next to yours, his body bent in a way to account for his height in a closet just shy of his head. It was difficult to make out his face in what dim light was available, but eventually they adjusted, his hair being the first thing you noticed. Aizawa's unkempt hair was pulled back into a ponytail, his face in full view, and yet his expression was soured. Perhaps because of the situation he was forced to be in, and also the situation that got him here in the first place. It made you remember the last time you've seen his face so open. The media fiasco about the student kidnapping would have been the last you've seen him brush up. But to see him in person after so many years, well, the last you would have seen his face this way was probably graduation.
Traveler.
Your thoughts broke again, catching you staring at Aizawa's face, whose eyes were now trained on you.
Yeah?
You stuttered, shaking your head.
Mind telling me why the closet?
You peered up at him, whose eyes still focused on your form, his arms crossed and his brow quirked in what you believed to be his signature questioning expression.
Spur of the moment,
you answered matter-of-factly, and as nonchalantly as you could.
That's unlike you.
My body doesn't keep up with how fast my brain processes, you know that. Plus, something needed to be decided quickly. I just took the best option available.
Without thinking of any moves ahead?
Well, that wasn't important at the time. 5 minutes ago.
A sigh escaped Aizawa's lips before you spotted what looked to be a glint of a smile, but only briefly in the darkness as his body slid a little lower to counterbalance his weight and his height. The size of the closet wasn't helping as his legs looked to have engulfed you from where he stood.
You're still the same as ever, traveler,
Aizawa commented, now looking a little relaxed despite the cramped space.
How is Endeavor's agency treating you these days?
Not bad. There's always PR to contend with considering the state of affairs around the city. His rise, his fame, the growing villainy that seems to perpetuate every piece of paperwork we have to go through. But I can deal with that. It's all words and spin. You jabbed your thumb towards the door, your eyes growing tired and your expression looking just as exhausted as Aizawa's. But this is madness.
You're a manager, right?
Questioned Aizawa.
Aren't you used to dealing with people nowadays?
In small office settings and one-on-one, yes. But when you have to account for every single body around you, it's just one scenario after another that plays. The frequency is just too much.
You scrunched your brow, feeling the tension return, this time to your forehead. These headaches were going to be the death of you tonight.
That's why you used to sit alone in the cafeteria.
He recalled, bringing your attention back to him and away from your growing headache.
You wanted to be away from your Quirk, calculating every move from all the students indirectly. But I guess that was also why Hisashi would always approach you every time, to help inadvertently train you to hone that Quirk onto a smaller setting.
A smile appeared on your lips. He really remembered those few moments hanging out during the lunch hour?
Huh. It took a while for me to realize what was happening too.
You remarked, the smile still present and yet the dull throb waning only by a fraction.
Still, Yamada himself is enough for one whole board meeting.
Righting yourself in the closet, you realized your body had also slumped in the cramped space, finding that your legs pressed against Aizawa's long ones during this whole time. You cleared your throat to distract yourself from the thought, even though the strain in your head was still ever present.
You're doing well yourself,
you spoke to break the momentary silence.
Leading the future's next line of heroes, huh?
A grumble escaped Aizawa's lips as you watched his head drop and shake in what looked like mild disappointment. It made you wonder about the state of affairs at UA, only briefly until your headache spiked in your temple, causing you to wince slightly.
Yeah,
responded Aizawa with a slight grimace.
They're getting there.
You don't sound optimistic about it. This time a groan escaped his lips, causing you to crack a smile before a bubble of laughter traveled up your throat.
Ow.
You grabbed onto your head, clasping at your skull from the pain that refused to subside. Your eyes squeezed tightly shut, feeling the pain crawl from one part of your skull to another. All of that processing from present situations to reminiscing to secondhand embarrassment had you in a spin. You really wished there was an off switch. It wasn't long until you felt a pair of hands hold your shoulders firmly, and something pressed against the top of your head. Memories flooded through your mind of these moments, something warm and comforting to ease the pain of your brain's constant need to process all sorts of information. The pain suddenly washed away. It wasn't sudden. It was almost a calming sensation, like a wave washing over you and taking it away just as soothingly. Opening your eyes, you saw the room alit with a red glow, finding that Aizawa had just activated his quirk on you, his eyes glowing in the dark. His forehead laid atop the crown of your head, and his breath washed over you. Your thoughts, whether from your own making or otherwise, disappeared. You felt present. It had always been this way during those nostalgic years. Aizawa, despite his nonchalant and tired attitude, had felt like the warmth of a fire, keeping you from these thoughts that you had very little control over. At the very least, he wasn't doused in alcohol like your other fellows enjoying their time at this long overdue reunion.
Oh, thanks,
you whispered, reaching your hands up to his wrists and holding onto them gently.
I needed that.
Yeah, it's not my scene either,
replied Aizawa as he pulled away from you, his quirk still active as his eyes lit the small space.
We should really just find a place for the two of us, away from this noise.
You care too much. Aizawa flinched from the statement, looking away with what you could see was a bit of embarrassment in his eyes. The red dimmed from them, but it allowed a reset of your thoughts not being compounded by the previous processes from the function hall. But I'll take you up on that offer, when you could spare a moment. You continued with a smile, now feeling only the dullness of the pain from earlier. I'm fairly busy nowadays with the agency, and keeping it running. The hint of a smile appeared on Aizawa's face, watching your smile brighten the dark room.
I'll check how my students are going, but I'm glad we got a chat at least. I really did miss that smile.
Now it was your turn to be taken back by his boldness. The smile on his face turned into a slight smirk, but his eyes didn't betray his statement. You chuckled, also hearing his own chuckles mingling with yours. Aizawa had been your saving grace while in UA, but here he was again, as if nothing had changed since your high school years. So, is it a date then? You asked, slightly teasing, slightly meaningful in your words. You watched Aizawa's smile grow, humming in agreement until a blast of light flooded the closet, spotting some of the catering staff standing by the door, confused and dumbfounded. They stared at the both of you with quizzical looks until you realized that Aizawa still held you by the shoulders and the positions in the cramped space was, well, compromising. Immediately, your brain fired up again, turning to the staff with a smirk. What? You asked with a bold tone and a small shrug of your shoulders. Aizawa turned to you with confusion laced in his brow until you spotted the two staff members flustered and hopping away from the entrance to allow the both of you to leave. Without a beat, you strode out of the closet, while Aizawa followed suit, keeping your eyes away from the staff members and towards another location in the hallway with purpose.
Did you just incriminate what we were doing?
Aizawa asked with slight annoyance once the two of you were out of earshot. No, you simply replied. I only insinuated, and all they did was jump to conclusions. Fastest way out of that situation without getting bogged down by details.
You never cease to amaze me,
he replied, his hands in his pockets while he stretched his limbs. A smile appeared on your lips before you turned to still find his tie, still loose from his own making. Without a thought, as if by instinct, you immediately went to fix and readjust it for him, halting the both of you in your tracks. I hope that I continue to do so, you replied, your tone warm and soft while you affixed his tie. It was rare to see him smile in public, but after many years of very little interaction, it felt like you were back in school again. It felt like you continued a long overdue conversation with him, and he still remembered. It felt like home, and you hoped the possibilities could be made possible.